I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead zinc silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineered gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from the wealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
And thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, I'm curious, the stress test on mortgages now, how is that working out?
How's the stress test working out? Well, it's working out exactly as the government had intended, or the OSFI had intended, but it's working out totally opposite to what you're hearing in the reported in the news and by realtors and housing analysts and economists, even the mortgage brokerage community, Jim. It is amazing the level of incompetence that is out there about the mortgage stress test. So what your listeners should understand is this, is that Vancouver and Toronto were the two cities the least impacted by the new mortgage stress test. The very, very least in the entire country. Now, if you're to move out to Abbotsford, you were impacted by the mortgage stress test way more than you were if you were buying a house in Vancouver.
In other words, Ross, it hurt the areas with the affordable housing more, and the places with the impossibly high prices weren't affected.
Well, actually, Jim, the truth is it didn't really impact anybody. What they don't understand is the OSFI, Jeremy Rudin, is not stupid. He is a very intelligent man. What he understood, which all of these people commenting about the mortgage stress test don't understand, is he was trying to stop the banks from expanding mortgage credit growth in Canada. So he had no problem with Canadians continuing to borrow on the exact same patterns they have borrowed mortgage money on for the last 30 years. The OSFI had no problem with that. The OSFI said to Canadians, as long as you keep borrowing money the exact same way you've borrowed for the last 30 years, we don't care. But what we're worried about is the banks, because we don't trust the banks to maintain those parameters we followed for the last 30 years. We believe, this is what we read into what the OSFI was saying, as the housing market slowed, as has happened time and time again in the past, the banks will change their lending practices to try to unstall the market or trying to delay the market slowdown. And they do that by relaxing their own mortgage lending terms that have been following in the past. So for the sake of the argument, Jim, if the bank has the flexibility to lend up to 39% gross debt service. So you can, for property, your mortgage, property taxes, and a little bit of your heat, the banks are legally allowed to lend you up to 39% of your income. Now, Canadians don't do that. Canadians will borrow somewhere between 28 and 32% generally. First-time buyers will borrow more. But that's the parameters that they stay within. By creating the mortgage stress test, the OFSI said, as long as you maintain those numbers, in other words, you stay between that 28 and 32% range, you can continue to get your mortgage even with the mortgage stress test, because the mortgage stress test allows the banks to go up to 39%. So if you're only asking for 32% gross debt service at the current 5-year posted rate, but they've got to add on the mortgage stress test, the bank, to increase, for the sake of the argument, a 2% increase in your mortgage rate, The bank also has the flexibility to go to 39% GDS, which effectively wipes out the impact of the mortgage stress test. But you were not going to read that in any published anywhere in Canada today. What I just told you. You're not going to read it from mortgage brokers. You're not going to read it from banks. You're not going to read it from realtors. You're not going to read it from anyone else. You can't find what I just told you in print anywhere in Canada today. Yet what I just told you is the truth. This is a black and white issue. This is a calculator issue. This is not complicated. When you did thousands of mortgages with your clients, as I have, you know the exact same pattern is followed by Canadians decade after decade after decade. Canadians are not stupid. Canadians understand how much of their money they're willing to use to own their home. They understand that. Barring job loss, Canadians are never going to lose their homes. Job loss is the only risk Canadians have for losing their home. There is no other reason. And even then, generally speaking, the vast majority of job loss impacted people can still sell their house and get out of the situation they're in. It's why we don't have a high foreclosure rate in Canada. We never will. It's not the nature of what a Canadian homeowner is. This mortgage stress test, which you're seeing across Canada by the Canadian Real Estate Association, the BC Real Estate Association, the Ontario Real Estate Association, the Canadian Mortgage Professionals Association of Mortgage Professionals, the Canadian Bankers Association, every economist at every bank, every housing analyst who's out there yapping with their blogs and their posts and everything else. They are all claiming the mortgage stress test was the reason why the market slowed down. And it has nothing to do with that, because mortgage math says there was no need for that to happen. People were not borrowing 39% GDS on their mortgages. If anyone questions my authority on this topic, I tell them to go right to the CMHC website, because CMHC for the last 7 years has actually posted what the average gross debt service ratio was for all of the mortgages that they insured for first-time home buyers. Those most at the option that are going to go to the highest gross debt service ratio. And you'll see when you look at CMHC's own data, Canadians didn't do that. They didn't take that higher rate. They're running between 30 and 32% a gross debt service ratio on insured mortgages. So, long story short, Jim, with the changes to the housing market are nothing to do with mortgage qualification rate or the stress test. That is a myth perpetuated by people who don't understand how the housing market functions. The housing market in British Columbia began cooling in 2016. It began cooling in Ontario in 2016. It takes a year to a year and a half normally for people to see that. Actually, BC, it was in the spring of 2016. And then you had your mortgage, then you had your $37,000 boost to first-time buyers, which ended up driving all your condominium prices starting in 2017 in British Columbia. In Ontario, the housing market was already cooling. But as a housing market is cooling, prices shoot up. You get the greatest year-over-year house price change at the same time that the housing market is already cooling off. That is just simply how the average selling price gets recorded. And it's why all of these comments about mortgage stress tests being blamed for the slowing housing market is nonsense, and those comments are simply coming from people who are ignorant to how a housing market works.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features to our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the Pink, symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, right now in the BC courts, there's a summary case going on that claims that the BC foreign buyer tax of 20% in most of BC's major real estate regions is unconstitutional. It violates the Canadian Charter of Rights and also violates international treaties, which a provincial government, of course, doesn't have the right to do. Do you think they have a good chance of winning that argument?
I believe this is actually should be in front of I believe this is a WTO issue, Jim. I said this on your show when they first brought the tax in. I do not believe, whether it's in British Columbia or Prince Edward Island, because Prince Edward Island has a residency requirement for the purchase of their real estate there. I do not believe when you have trade agreements with other countries that you can exclude residential real estate. Now, this is not a topic that's brought up, and it would only result from a class action. Now, this class action is saying that it's not constitutional. I am not a constitutional expert by any means, and I really have no idea what the rights of a non-resident are under Canadian law. I wouldn't think the Canadian Constitution would apply to them, but, our Constitution in Canada is interpreted by the courts, and our courts, as all Canadians know, seem to be the ones who direct the outcomes of their readings from the Constitution, and our elected leaders remain silent and let the courts technically do the dirty work for them. I really don't think it's a constitutional issue, Jim. I think they're barking up the wrong tree on that one. Again, you could get a constitutional lawyer to give you a better answer about that. I do also question, though, whether it really is a WTO issue or a trade issue. Was residential real estate excluded from the trade deals we have had signed in the past? I.e., is there a provision in the free trade agreement with Mexico and United States that prevents an American from buying a property in Vancouver? Or does that trade agreement create a right for an American to buy a property in Vancouver? I don't know, and I don't know what the impacts of the taxes are on something like that, impact of the taxes, but I can certainly figure that I can't see those type of loopholes being left in these international trade agreements. Could be wrong, but I'll leave that to someone else. All I know is that it would have to be a class action lawsuit, Jim. So the odds of an individual taking Canada to the World Trade Organization to get this resolved are probably next to nil.
One of the people representing the plaintiff, Jing Li, who's from China, got her degree at the University of Saskatchewan, settled in Burnaby. One of her lawyers is constitutional expert Joseph Arve. I've seen him in action, and he usually doesn't back the losing side. We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the pink CYDVF, and on Frankfurt C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Ross Kay. Ross, a listener setting this question. A local real estate agent stated regardless of the data available, There's no way to determine where a market is heading. Is that true? And is there a way for them to find out what really is happening?
If there was not a way to know where the market is heading, I would be out of business. I would not be able to be in business. Real estate markets are not like stock market. Real estate markets are easily tracked, easily followed, easily forecast. It is so easy, it's ridiculous. We would not say that we could time the market unless we really can time the market. My name, Ross K., is on Ross K. Realty Consult. That's my family's name. I had two earlier generations of realtors, real estate salespeople, who carried the K name. I worked with my father for 20 years in the same office. We shared the same office. Anyone who thinks I would do anything to damage the reputation of my family's name doesn't know who I am. I coach literally about 36 kids each year on 3 separate teams as a volunteer, and all of those kids look to me because I tell the truth. We can time any housing market anywhere if we have the data. We can time every single municipal housing market in Canada today because we have the data. We have the data. We also know how to read it. When you read what the data is saying, it is never saying what the real estate agents, the Realtors Trade Association, the banks, the economists, the housing analysts. It never says what they're saying that it says because they're reading it the wrong way. We measure the buyer mix every single month. Let me put it to you this way, Jim. When you ask me that question, I can really drill this down to one simple solution. I can explain it to you this way. And your listeners should listen to this very carefully because I probably won't say it again. I probably shouldn't even be saying it right now. All house price change, all of it, is caused by a shifting buyer mix. That buyer mix shifts gradually each and every month. The shifting buyer's mix, if you know how to measure it, always forecasts your house price gain months down the road. If you're measuring the number of first-time buyers who are buying in the market, you know how skewed the average selling price is in a given month. You know that 2 and 3 and 4 months later, what that skewed number of first-time buyers in today's month is going to have a consequence in prices 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 months later. When you know that a housing market is traveling on a certain path and the first-time buyers' share of sales is increasing or decreasing on a different path, you know what's going to happen with prices in the market a year in advance, not just a few months. You can reach it way out to over a year. That's why in the fall of 2016, we told everyone on this show that housing prices in Vancouver had corrected 29%. It's going to take you a while to hear that because of that $37,000 bump that your first-time buyers got last year, that artificially inflated your condominium prices for a short period of time. But the fundamentals that caused us to measure that 29% drop back in the fall of 2016 hasn't changed. In Ontario, the people who are getting our intelligence in Ontario, they knew way back in 2016 that the Ontario housing market was already contracting. Now, in the end stages of a contraction, which we don't go and tell people, we have a problem. The problem is we know housing prices are going to drop. We know the housing market is contracting. We know that the final stages of a contracting market are actually the highest house price gain year over year. We know that that's the way that it goes. That's why the greater fool theory is out there. There's always a greater fool until housing prices start to drop, and then the fools no longer appear. So your question was, can someone who, they're saying that you can't time the market. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What I'll tell your listeners is this. What is going to happen tomorrow, I knew about months ago. It isn't going to change. It is impossible. The government can change any rules they want this month, and it will have no impact on my forecast because those decisions are already made. Now, a government can change a rule at certain times during a year where that they could just hit the nail right on the head where it's the wrong time. But I know when that rule comes into effect, whether or not the market is at that stage or not, that change is going to be reflected in the sales data. Now, this is not crystal ball gazing. It's a science. When you understand how a housing market functions, we have a metric, Jim, where we actually track the sales mix. That metric we have goes back 30 years. That metric always leads price change. Always. It has never ever been mistaken because it can't. When you're measuring what groups of buyers are active in a market at any given month, you know what the outcome of that is going to be on the average selling price.
Ross, we were emailed this question. What I'm seeing in the GTA is that the detached segment indeed dropped significantly, especially the bad houses, as Ross has mentioned. But at the same time, the relatively new towns and semi seem to be consistently going up from the beginning of the year. Is there something to be expected during a correction?
So what this listener is seeing, it is the truth. Your more expensive, inferior quality, single detached homes in the most expensive areas, the areas that have experienced the greatest price appreciation always drop the quickest. Then the better quality homes drop. Then the a little bit lesser quality homes drop. Then the little bit lesser quality homes drop. Now we're down into a townhouse. Quality is actually a function of the selling price of a house. So it's a little complicated to explain to people on the radio, but or on the show here. But quality is always constantly changing in a housing market. It's never an apples to apples comparison. Not only is the sales mix shifting, but so is the quality shift. What this listener is asking us basically, Jim, is he's saying, I'm watching single detached houses fall, but I want to buy a townhouse and those ones aren't falling. That's really what this listener is saying. Now, I understand that that's what this listener is saying. So my comment would be, no, he's focusing on only looking at probably a couple of townhouse complexes that he would prefer to buy in. And he is not seeing those prices drop. He is probably also seeing, which he doesn't really understand, that the ones that he is seeing sell this year are actually a higher quality townhouse than the one that sold last year. Because they probably have brand new granite countertops. They may have had brand new kitchens installed. They may have had brand new roofs. They may have had new HVAC systems, custom appliances. They could be worth $40,000 to $50,000 to $60,000 more than what was selling last year when the junkier townhouses in the exact same complex were selling. Maybe they are former rental units where the owner purchased a property years ago at a far lower price, rented it out for a few years. Now that the market is starting to correct, they've gone in and renovated the whole townhouse and put it on the market because they want to get their cash out. Well, all of the renovation work that they spent means it's a higher quality of house. That means even if it sold for the exact same price as last year, it's really dropped huge in dollars. That listener needs to understand, if you're not measuring the overall housing market and you're not understanding how the entire housing market is functioning, because you're only looking in one place, you're always looking in the wrong place. You need to look at the whole market so that you have a perspective on those houses that you're targeting. Once you have that perspective and you understand how the whole market is functioning at a particular moment in time, then you have an understanding of what price change you're seeing in listing. I mean, your listener also doesn't understand that the percentage of listings that are actually selling in 2018 are way low, like in the GTA, are way lower than the percentage of listings that were selling last year. In other words, only those houses that are that much better are actually selling, because the ones that were selling like last year, they don't sell this year. Only the better houses sell.
Ross, with the new government in Ontario, a listener asks, what does Ross think about the announcements made during the election campaign that the new provincial government is going to introduce changes that may bring back the real estate bubble, eliminate things like the foreign buyer tax and so on? Can that have any effect on the ongoing correction?
Awesome question. So this listener, it's an awesome question, especially, Jim, when we look in context of what happened in British Columbia. So what your listeners need to understand is this. The housing market functions in one way and one way only. Everybody can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter. The market is always going to function in the same way. If an input into the market changes, there is going to be a reciprocal change in the market. In other words, in physics, we know that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. We know in a housing market, for every change, there is an equal change in the housing market. So in other words, if the interest rates rise, housing prices will fall. If the government gives $37,000 of an interest-free loan to first-time buyers in British Columbia, it will cause a $160,000 to $170,000 increase in the average selling price over the next 14 to 18 months, which is exactly what happened in British Columbia. If Doug Ford in Ontario listens to Tim Hudak, former PC leader and now head of the Ontario Real Estate Association, and he believes the nonsense that Tim's going to be force-feeding him, as your BC politicians believe the British Columbia Real Estate Association, and he says, okay, I'm going to reduce land transfer tax for first-time buyers. So they're not going to pay land transfer tax. We're going to give them a rebate they already give a rebate for that. Let's say they do it for trade-up buyers. Or we're going to remove the Toronto municipal land transfer tax. Every $1,000 that you give back to a home buyer re-enters the market. It doesn't go into the home buyer's pocket or go into the home buyer's bank account and stays there. It goes back into the housing market. If you give someone $37,000 more buying power, they will spend $37,000 more, as long as they stay within that 32% gross debt service ratio we talked about at the start of the show. They have always done that. Canadians have done that for 40 years.
Ross,
they never change.
Ross, is the basic message here: the government, no matter at what level, should get their fingers out of the real estate market and just let the market play out the way markets always have for the last 5,000 years?
No. What the government should insist upon is that their economists, that their consultants, that everyone associated with housing, the most important financial asset in Canada, gets trained before they open their mouths. They should keep their mouths closed until they can explain everything that happens in a housing market, because everything is predictable. Every single change, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Every single one. If they're going to change, give a $37,000 first-time homebuyer credit in British Columbia without understanding that's going to cause the average selling price of condominiums to increase $170,000, they should keep their mouths shut. You don't go to a doctor and have the doctor because the doctor is going to tell you some story that isn't true. No, if the doctor says we've got to do this because you've got this problem and this is going to be the outcome, you expect that to happen. It's no different in a housing market. You can't change these things. People are going to enter 25 years of mortgage debt servicing based on myths and lies communicated to them by people the stakeholders in the real estate industry. The government, before it makes a single move, needs to understand what the consequence of that move is. Look, you've got laneway houses in Vancouver, Jim. Okay, laneway houses. Now they're being discussed in the Greater Toronto area. Laneway houses naturally causes housing prices to increase. Naturally. The data is black and white on this issue. If you are going to allow people to build laneway homes, you are going to raise the average selling price. It's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying you should not allow it. I'm just saying that you need to communicate with people what the consequence of this decision is. It is not going to make houses more affordable. That is a myth. It is going to make houses less affordable. The only way, well, you got a major problem. British Columbia, the Greater Vancouver has a major problem because you can't grow. There isn't the land to build houses on and still maintain your agricultural boundaries. So there's really only two choices ahead for Vancouver, for the sake of the argument. Vancouver is going to have to decide, are we going to outsource our agriculture, move it over to Alberta, I guess, is the easiest solution, and build more houses, or are we going to force Vancouver residents to go up higher in the air, which naturally makes houses less affordable. Housing naturally makes housing less affordable. It creates a homeless problem. It creates a renter problem, which you're all facing right now. So I understand you can't have it all ways, Jim. One truth of real estate has remained true. So, this is the one thing realtors will say, or housing analysts will say, which is really true. There is a limited amount of land. How we use that land and the choices we make as a society are going to dictate the quality of life of the citizens who live there. If you think it's better, if society in Vancouver believes that it's better for people to be forced into high rises and to pay higher prices because of that forcing going on, and for the greater community to have to expend more and more of their tax dollars supporting the homeless, supporting subsidized housing, supporting housing affordability. If that's what people want, that's what they should know going in. That's what the deal is. If they say no, maybe we need to start growing our food a little bit further away. We're going to increase our trucking so we maintain its freshness. But the land that food right now is growing on, we could build houses on there. If we want to grow, that's a choice that we may have to make. Maybe we need to let our farms go vertical. Another thing they don't even talk about. Maybe the inefficiency of Vancouver and British Columbia agriculture needs to be addressed by the government because the land is too valuable to be used to grow corn on or vegetables. It's too valuable for that.
Ross, always some interesting concepts, and we'll talk about them more.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jim.
My guest has been home ownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. You're listening to HoweStreet.com Radio. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HoweStreet. Comments about the show or questions for our guests can be sent to info@HoweStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HoweStreet.com Radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HoweStreet.com Radio is a production of HoweStreet Media Incorporated.